Welcome back to the WCTV Senior Spotlight Series. I'm Ed Diorio alongside a good friend and a fellow senior of mine, Mr. Jack Hillgrove, a sports broadcasting major in the class of 2021 from Baldwin, Pennsylvania. Jack Hillgrove, it's the name around the area. So you obviously probably had a lot of connections, a lot of options. You could have gone anywhere, but you ended up here at Waynesburg University. How?
Well, and Ed, thank you for doing this, and this is really awesome, and for you to be able to be up here with me is pretty cool. But like a lot of people that go here and major in what we major in, I went to the Waynesburg University Sports Announcing Camp in the summer of 2015, and was pretty much all set in stone from there. I fell in love with sports broadcasting probably at the end of my sophomore year of high school. I was a big print journalism guy. Like you said, I went to Baldwin High School. It's about 8 miles south of the city of Pittsburgh. I graduated with 350 people. We had a big school and a big newspaper. It was a 20-page paper that we printed 6 times a year. We had a sports section. I was the sports editor of the paper for 3 years. I was real into, layout with Adobe InDesign. I got into that early. I was into writing the articles and editing the articles that people submitted, and posting all of our pages up on the board and laying everything out and designing everything. And the back set of the sports page or the paper was our sports page, and it was like the front page of the paper was just on the back, and we got to design that every issue too. It was great. And I always was in love with what my grandfather did. My grandfather's the voice of the Steelers and the Pitt Panthers, but I didn't really figure it out completely until the end of my sophomore year of high school. I was a spotter for him and still am from time to time, just not in 2020 because of COVID and everything going on. From the 2013 Pitt football season until now, I was one of his main spotters. And that allowed me to watch him closer, work with him, see how he prepares, see how he executes on game day, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. So I told him that, and that was one of the cooler conversations I've ever had with anybody because he knew that I was in the newspaper. He knew I was a relatively smart kid in high school, but he didn't really know that that's where I wanted to be. I think he always thought that I would end up in sports somehow, but I don't know if he ever thought that I was going to want to follow in his footsteps. And right from there, I speak at this camp at Waynesburg in the summer. You're going. I'm paying for it, you're going. And I'm like, okay, where the heck is Waynesburg and who the heck is Lanny Fratteri? Those are my first 2 questions. I was, too young, and the Pirates weren't very good. We didn't grow up, especially when we were younger, with them being really bad. When he was the voice of the team, I didn't pay attention to them. I love the Steelers and I love Pitt. Those were my teams. I wasn't even really into the Penguins that much. So I didn't know a heck of a whole lot about Lanny Fratteri, and I sure as heck didn't know where Waynesburg was. So I was scared. Up until like the first or second night before, or the night before, the 2 nights before the camp, I didn't want to come. I didn't want to have to, leave home for a week and go to a place I'd never been before, an hour away from my house. And I ended up doing it, and it was the best decision I've ever made because from that moment on, it led me to here. And then as my grandfather talked, anytime he would introduce me to people, this is my grandson Jack, he wants to do what I do. I'm really glad I came here. My pap he set it in motion, and Lanny took it from there. And I'm really, really blessed to have those 2 people in my life when it comes to doing what I want to do. And I don't take it for granted every day. I'm very, very blessed, and I'm very, very blessed that I came to Waynesburg. It's a really long first answer. I'm sorry, but
I mean, it's a good one, that's for sure. I mean, and I couldn't have been happier personally as your friend that you ended up here too. And we were both campers.
Yeah.
Not the same year, sadly enough, but I was in 2016, you were in 2015. In that camp, you do get a taste of being in here, being in the radio station, being in a class setting with Lanny. Of all the organizations that we have here, all of which you've been involved with, we've both been involved with to some degree, whether it's the Yellow Jacket, whether it's WCYJ, WCTV, etc., and etc. What has been the biggest influence and what's been the most memorable influence of everything that's on this 4th floor and the one segment that's on the 3rd floor here in Buell Hall for you?
Yeah, well, you get exposed to that. You've said it. You get exposed to that at the camp, right? Everything that we've done the last 4 years, you get a small little taste of it and where you're going to be working. and one of the things, and not to bring up your documentary again, but Greg Finley, a former student here, said one of his big things was transferring to Waynesburg was he reflected on the camp. Okay, Richard Krause taught me how to score baseball cards. He's the department chair. Lanny is obviously Lanny. Doug Wilson was there teaching you how to read scripts on the radio. He's one of your professors. It's the familiarity that addresses you not only with the equipment and with the business at the sports broadcasting camp, but who's going to be molding you the next 4 years? Not just Lanny, but the department chair and Richard Krause, Melinda Roeder, Doug Wilson, all these professors that you're going to have and learn a ton from are at this camp. But to answer your question, wow, I don't know if I can pick one. Probably the Waynesburg University Sports Network. I remember at the end of our freshman year, I sat down with Drew Brown and Brennan McCall, and I said, obviously I'm here for play-by-play, but I would really, really love to pick your guys' brain and pick, about directing and producing live sports. And things happen, equipment delays, things of that nature. We've talked about that, but finally, I get the chance to do it. About a month ago, coming up on a month ago, Carmichael's in California. Again, shout out to Richard Krause, Mr. Carmichael's, hooking us up over there, and they were great. They were great hosts. And I was able to organize, direct for a portion, and produce a live sporting event. And I get like a pit in my stomach talking about it because I don't believe that I was able to get it done, especially on 9 days' notice. And it worked. The Waynesburg University Sports Network was one of the biggest reasons why I came here. I was able to see the old truck my junior year of high school and a visit there during a football game, which was really, really cool. And I was just happy I was able to get a part of it and be able to be a part of it. Hopefully, with athletics coming in the spring, we'll be able to do some more. But yeah, I mean, it's been great.
Talk about your biggest influence from your major standpoint. How happy are you that you came here, and what's been one of the biggest influence and memories that you've made outside of this department? And it can be within the department, obviously, with the people in it, but when you're not working in the studio, and when you're not putting your nose to the grind and trying to get work done.
Well, I would have to. So when you and I both got hired at Entercom, and I would assume PJ said the same thing to you, and he in talks with him because I knew him prior. He said the same thing to me. He talked so highly of Waynesburg, and I think that's my proudest moment is outside of the department and what I've accomplished. I've been able to be hired as a producer at 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh, and in talks with my boss, PJ Kamenchik, and before in the hiring process, he spoke so highly of Waynesburg. He's like, I'll go down there all the live long to pick kids to come work here because you guys are awesome. So he doesn't just supervise 93.7 The Fan and oversee that. He oversees where you work at KDKA AM, the oldest radio station and the first radio station in American history. That's a big deal. And for him to be able to think and be, one of the bigwigs there who's hiring, entry-level positions, for him to think so highly of Waynesburg and say that makes me so proud every day that I came here. And it's not just because of the great faculty here. He wouldn't say that if it weren't for just about me and my work ethic, but you and your work ethic and everybody on this floor's work ethic, chipping in to build something great, not only to build great individual careers, but to build a great reputation for Waynesburg University. That's why I'm proud.
How happy are you that you came here?
Ecstatic. I applied to one school, and it was here. I took the SATs once in high school. I was committed here before I was committed here. I wasn't going to go anywhere else. Like Ed in his senior spotlight, he said that he's always been a small school guy. A lot of people that know me were surprised that I didn't go to Pitt because I've grown up a Pitt fan my whole life. My grandfather's the voice of the team. My dad went to Pitt as well. My dad majored in communications and rhetoric at Pitt as well. But yeah, it was Waynesburg full and through. And, Lanny Fratteri can take 100% credit for that in the Waynesburg University Sports Network. Yeah, it might have been cool to go to school in Oakland and live 15 minutes from home and maybe possibly being able to commute to the University of Pittsburgh. But at the same time, Oakland's Oakland. It's not really a college campus feel. And you might not get that here, like a big-time college campus feel, like maybe like an SEC school. I'll never know. I don't really care. But I'm so glad that I came here And like I said, I applied to only one school. I wouldn't change that because for two reasons. Number one, I wouldn't have gone anywhere else. And number two, the other schools I would have applied to, I probably wouldn't have got into. So it was good, to protect the ego a little bit and protect and try to reiterate to myself that I was smart. Because if I would have went like 1 for 4, 1 for 5, I probably would have been a little upset. But we'll have no way of knowing, and I'm glad we'll have no way of knowing because I ended up here. So
talented,
and thank you. I
and your
appreciate
talents have led you to, as you mentioned, the job you have now. Is that what is next for you? Obviously, like I mentioned, you do have another semester here, but the end will come eventually. What are you looking at in the near future? And if you've thought about it, and if you maybe have a solid and thought out plan, the long term.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way in having a plan in this business, right? It's so. One day you could think you know what you're doing, and then something might pop up, and overnight you're in a new city on the opposite side of the country. So, and like you getting hired pretty much at the right time, right before COVID hit, and getting your feet wet a little bit at a professional radio station. For me, that's the immediate future. I plan to move home back to my parents' house after I graduate, tentatively in May of 2021. I'll work at 93.7 The Fan as much as possible and on weekends. And I'll be returning to the Trib Live High School Sports Network this winter after taking the fall off to do some stuff with my alma mater, Baldwin, for their football team. So I'll be going back to Trib Live, announcing high school sports, and I'll have that and my job at KDKA 93.7 The Fan. So that's the immediate future. It doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I'm doing that because I think it's going to give me a little bit more time to constantly be updating my reel and my resume and being at home and building connections where I know that they are through my family and through people I've met at Waynesburg, and kind of just wait for the right moment. Long term, I want to succeed my grandfather ultimately and become the next voice of the Panthers and the next voice of the Steelers, because my pap has been. Now, this is why I think it's so cool. So my pap has been, if you're dating back to Pitt basketball, his first gig, over 50 years, and coming up on 50 years for Pitt as a whole. He hasn't shown no signs of retiring, and I'm only 22 years old. 4 or 5 years from now, let's say he does and I take over and I'm like only 27 or 28, I, Lord willing, plan on holding it for another 50 years. How cool would it be for a century for the Hillgrove name to fill the airwaves of the city of Pittsburgh? That's my dream, and that gives me goosebumps thinking about it, and I'm going to work like heck every day to make sure it happens, but if it doesn't, it doesn't. I've taken a real liking to what we've done with the Waynesburg University Sports Network and being behind the scenes and directing and producing. I know Drew Brown, a friend and alum of the department, came here as a sports broadcasting major, left as the producer of the Waynesburg University Sports Network, and he's produced ACC championship games for soccer for Pitt Studios and the ACC network, and directed sporting events for the University of Pittsburgh. It's pretty good for coming up on 4 years removed from college and only being 25 years old. So, we'll see wherever it takes us, and I'm not going to be one to script out completely where I'm going to end up. But until the skillet's hot, we'll chill out and we'll update our reel and we'll work at 93.7 The Fan and announce some sports for Trib Live High School Sports Network. So, not too worried about it right now. That could change when the cap and gown gets shipped and you're like, oh my goodness, I need to get it together. I'm an adult now. So, but for now, we're hanging out and we're having a good time, and whatever happens, happens.
He got that right. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
And I'll say, you talking about you succeeding your grandfather possibly, you said that gives you goosebumps. And that one name filling a century, I'm not obviously part of that family, but the goosebumps are real for me too.
I don't think you would be able to get that anywhere else in the country.
Hard to find. Hard to find. Another thing that's hard to find is all the experiences that both you and I have experienced here. What are you going to miss the most about this place?
Oh, wow. The people. You could open up a pamphlet and you can watch a couple of our videos on YouTube and figure out what we have here. But you don't, and you can get a gist of that from an outside perspective, but you don't know everything until you make the people, I mean, we're family up here. I don't have a bad thing to say about anybody on this floor that's a student here or a professor. I am blessed every day I came here. I made some lifelong friends here, several lifelong friends here. You're included in that conversation, Ed. And yeah, I mean, the people, and it's not like, we're going away completely. I mean, modern technology is vast enough. We'll be able to communicate with each other on a daily basis, pretty much no matter where we are. But these are going to be times and, memories that I'll cherish forever, working on Woosum Cruise with you guys, being a part of that election night special that Chris Hulse produced a couple of days ago. Working on that crew and interacting with people and laughing and having fun and enjoying each other's company, and at the same time achieving something great, that I'm going to look back on that 10 years from now and say I'm so glad I did that, and I'm so glad with who I did it with.